We're in White Plains, New York, and once again, we've come across a basement that's already been waterproofed by another company. Normally, in several different videos, we're tearing out all different type of gutter systems or box systems and things like that. This is actually pipe and stone. It's what we use at American Tri Basement Systems, but you're going to see that it's all about the installation. I can't stress enough, the proper installation is everything. You can have pipe, you can have stone, you can have the right kind of pipe, you can have the right kind of stone. Unless it's installed correctly, that is specific for a particular type of foundation, you can cause way more damage than you're ever going to fix, and you won't get the basement dry unless you have the right installation with the right products. So as we take a look in here, you're going to see that the pipe is really high up against the bottom of the re-cemented area. In other words, where they put the cement back on top of the new waterproofing. So if you can see here, the pipe is right there, and this is the new cement, and it's a minimal amount of cement. But notice the edge is perfectly straight right along here. That means that they waterproofed and went right up against a finished wall. That is one of the worst ideas in the world, because everything that happened back here is behind a studded out wall, which means mold is going to grow. Mold needs lack of light, lack of ventilation, and an organic food source in order to grow. But if nothing happens unless you add water or moisture. So if you put your waterproofing right up here against the studded out wall, and you see the studs here, back here was all insulation, and this was drywall, locking all the moisture and all the water in to the area here, and the drainage doesn't start to here. So this was a mold engine. It was just growing mold like crazy. If you take a look here, I mean, just with one hit of the hammer, that's not what you want for cement to be put back after removing your main body of basement floor. That's just a bad idea. This is a bad installation. The other thing too is that they made a complete cut all the way down the wall, where what we would do normally is leave pieces of the floor intact, so it would be over on top of the footing and up against and holding the wall out. So it's still part of the main body of the floor, so it has support from the floor, has support from the footing, and it's also holding the walls out. That's the proper way to waterproof. But this has already been broken up, so there's been some structural integrity issues here. We're going to use our proprietary product, Supercrete, which actually grows into old concrete, and it's going to become one with the floor again and give it an enormous amount more structural stability over onto that footing at the full thickness it should be, and holding those walls out all the way around all four walls. If you see here, we have an old drain, pretty rusted out, and if you look, coming underneath the steps, we have another pipe that looks like it was set up in order to drain back down into here. Now the problem is that with this area here, the homeowner's been complaining that water's actually hydrostatically been rising up out of here to the point where they had to put a drain in across the front of the door to keep it from getting into the basement. It's kind of one problem going to another problem, and neither one is really fixing what's going on here. As we move inside, we can see we have that drain that's in front of the door, looking at it from the opposite direction. Now it goes to here, and then it has an opening of a pipe barely below the floor that dumps into this basin, which has all the cleanouts for all the sewage and the street drains. So the way we're going to approach it is take this out, and instead of having this much drainage within the depth of the floor with a thin coat of concrete over top of it, we're going to put in a very significant amount of drainage that's going to go around from here in two directions around to sump pumps and have the water flow that way. Now the back wall hasn't been addressed yet. We're going to do the back wall, and then we're going to see how the pipes are set up here to see if it's feasible to work our drainage around the front of here. A little tricky when you're getting near the old cast iron sewage pipes and things like that. We've broken the floor in about several different places, and the pipe is exactly the same level all the way around, so there's no pitch to it. It's certainly not the kind that you'd like for optimum drainage. So as you walk around here, you're going to see this is a perfectly smooth line across this drainage. Means they finished the concrete right up against the studded wall, locking all that water in there. And you can see they didn't bother breaking out the floor between the end of the drainage here. This is all the existing floor. This is all just a bad idea. You're going around to where their sump pump is, which is over in this corner here. This sump is going to be torn out, and this is all going to be refinished. They put the sump right into the middle of the finished basement room. So the last thing in the world we want to do is that. We have other utility areas where we can easily put our drainage in, or our pumps in, our pump station. We're going to be putting in 2 battery backup systems with this particular system. We're going to have one pump at the far corner over here and another pump over in the front corner here. And then we're going to be able to run the discharges wherever we want throughout all 4 walls. So it really opens up some opportunities and makes it a whole lot more effective to be able to get the water out of the basement in a place on the outside for the water to percolate away. To have your discharge on the inside of your studded out wall, from an aesthetic standpoint, I think it'd probably be just about as bad an idea as you could have. Whereas the way that we're going to do it is we can go from any one of our pump stations and run our discharge through our trench because of the amount of drainage that we do, where drainage is going to be about this wide and about this deep. So there's plenty of room for an 1.5 PVC pipe to run through it. So we can discharge anywhere around any wall that we're putting drainage in around the entire foundation. We're doing all 4 walls here. So we can figure out where we want to get the drainage. And it's actually a little bit tricky, and we'll get into that a little bit more later, but we found a way to discharge the water very effectively, which on this particular property is one of the bigger challenges. Okay, you can see the depth of the pipe on the inside here. We're going to do a little comparison now that we have a whole bunch of the system torn out. And you can see that, you know, how high it is, like this, and with just even a small little hammer like this, the floor is coming out. You can see this is already, the cement is going into the stone. There should be a vapor barrier over top of that. So this looks like about a 1/2 inch of concrete that's going over top of this pipe. And if I clear it off, you got a little stone on the side of it, but the pipe is within the depth of the floor. It's a really bad idea. You want to get this, all of the drainage, so that it starts several to 10 inches below the bottom of the floor, and that way the water doesn't get anywhere near porous concrete floor, which will absorb it, and you're going to have a damp floor all the time. So take a look at where the depth of this is, and then we'll go over to the trench, and I got a little piece of pipe. This is our pipe. It's going to be pitched 1 inch every 10 feet, but it's going to be packed in stone completely. So there's going to be several inches of stone on top of and all the way around this pipe, giving an enormous amount of drainage. If you're managing the water down here, as opposed to managing the water here within the depth of the floor, this whole area between here and down here stays completely free of water. That's how you get your floor to be dry. One of the key components of doing basement waterproofing. And then of course we're going to re-cement to the full thickness of the floor, where we have our drain board, our flow channel down and across, and that would go over top of that with a vapor barrier. There was no vapor barrier, there was no flow channel in the system that was put in, and this is a recent system. This system was just put in, we're looking at August right now, it was put in April. It was a complete failure, and they had to go with an entirely different system. They couldn't stand the results that they had gotten. And once again, we're back to the old adage that the one thing that holds true about basement waterproofing is when you waterproof your basement, you don't want to do it twice. Okay, as we were working our way around, digging out our trench, we ran into a very old sewer line that had been corrected from the floor up, but as we exposed it, you can tell it's really old cast iron sewer line that cuts directly across underneath the floor. Obviously it was installed before this floor was poured in this house, and it went straight over to the cleanouts, the main sewer lines that go out to the street. So the homeowner was very concerned because of the age of this, and it wasn't a full-size sewer line, and he said, what can we do? So he got his plumber to come in, and we're going to work with the plumber, which we do on a regular basis. So we're going to cut this off, cap it off, and then the plumber is going to run a 3-inch PVC line in our trench, because our drainage trench is so significant that we easily can run that line all the way around in the trench effortlessly to where the cleanouts are, because we go right by them, and he can tie in. So it's a nice combination of being able to work with a homeowner, with a plumber, to facilitate something that would be a disaster if this thing cracked and you had to take up the whole floor again in order to replace it. We're going to completely sidestep that by utilizing our trench in order to facilitate the run of a whole new PVC line and then getting rid of the old one. Some of the challenges in running your drainage around the perimeter of a basement is going through a bathroom. So what we're going to be doing here, and especially after that we ran into the situation where we're going to be changing the sewer line coming from that back wall around and actually following the trench and tying in here. We're actually going to remove the toilet. And so we're going to give us more room in order to run our trench in and behind it to get flush with the wall, be able to set up our flow channel and everything drained down in it. And then by removing this, we get a better view or lay of the land of where the plumbing is underneath here. So we'll be able to run that other sewer line through, and we have a clean out here. So we're going to be able to see how the fittings work. And then the plumber is going to be able to tie into there. So it's going to be a pretty short run over to where the sewer line drainage. Okay, so we have an enormous amount of stone in the trench surrounding our pipe, and that allows us to work the pitch of the pipe. The pipe that we use is corrugated, which if you pitch it correctly is self-cleaning. When the water flows over the corrugations, it actually creates a churning effect. So any little bit of silt that could get into the pipe gets washed away, carried to our pump, and our pump will pass half-inch solids all day long. So our system is perpetually self-cleaning, so there's no maintenance issue. We're not going to call you to set up a maintenance schedule and then charge you a couple $100 a couple times a year like all the other waterproofing companies. Our system will never need that type of maintenance because of the amount of drainage that we put in. So you can see we have this wide of drainage, this deep, but we've left enough room here that we're going to be able to, in here, well, I just pulled that up, so if we pull that back down like this, you can see we're going to be able to re-cement the floor to the full thickness of the floor, which is structurally sound. And then because this was all taken out, no spacers were left, it's our proprietary product, Supercrete, which has the active ingredient, the crystalline ingredient that actually grows back into the main body of the floor. We're actually going to be able to reconstruct the floor back into one piece of concrete over up against our flow channel, which will be installed next to the full thickness of the floor, which is fully code compliant. We have our sump basket, which is going to be our pump station. And then you can see the pipe that's going in here, and the level that it comes in, you can see there's an enormous amount of drainage here just by checking out where the pipe is coming through the sump pump basket and why the water can't get anywhere near the bottom of the floor. It's going to be managed several to 10 inches, and this is even more than that down below the bottom of the floor, so the floor is going to get completely dry. The drain that was here didn't go anywhere. It was just a capacity drain, whereas there was just a hole dug underneath with some stone. But over time, what happens is if it doesn't flow to somewhere, leaves or whatever will collect in there, and it reduces the volume over time, you get less capacity of that type of system. So what we've done is we've taken a whole big chunk of the floor out here and then dug down and filled it with an enormous amount of stone. And then we set up our speedy drain that's going through this step to the inside and then tying in with a T right here to our system. So any water collecting out here or even coming up hydrostatically will flow through to the system, go to the pump, and then be pumped up out away from the house. So it'll completely solve the outside problem with the inside drainage. This is the front of the house. We just went through how we reset up the outside drain on the back side of the house. If you recall, we had that steel grate that was rusting out that had the drain flowing over into it from here. We've replaced it with our speedy drain. Now it has tape on it. That's so when we re-cement over top of it, we don't get any cement into the drain itself. And then once it's all re-cemented, we pull the tape off of it. But we're taking this outside drainage and once again tying it into the inside drainage. So no amount of water here will ever build up that will actually flow inside of the house like it was prior. One of the main reasons that they were getting basement waterproofing. From what I understand is that from the homeowners that they got water about this high in the basement after a good heavy storm. So with our system, it's going to be able to handle that and even much more. And then the outside here, which was problematic, is now tied into the enormous amount of drainage that we've installed around the entire perimeter. So this basement is now in fabulous shape. It's going to stay dry regardless of the size storm. The discharge was going to come through here. This is the one that was going to come out of that basin that was made out when they originally built the house that has the cleanouts for all the sewer lines and things like that. They were going to actually use that for their sump basket, have the discharge come up, and they started to drill the hole here and realized they didn't have the right tools in order to do it and different things like that. But so if you're discharging water at this level here, coming out like a foot and then shooting water out, this entire driveway is going to be covered with water on a regular basis, which is never a good idea, even in warm weather. But when things get cold, as that water's shooting out, ice is going to create, water's going to go over top of the ice and continue to completely turn this whole driveway into a skating rink. So this idea of putting water out this way, of all things that you'd ever want to do, you'd want to avoid that at all costs. Another aspect of what we ran into with this job is we saw a discharge line on the inside that was actually coming up out of the drainage area, but on the inside of a studded out wall. So, and it's in the finished area of the basement, so not a real good match, not anything we'd ever even think about doing is putting a discharge up on the outside of a studded out wall and going through the wall. Not only that, but if you look at the walkway there, it's on an incline and they were just going to discharge the water on top of the walkway. And then you have a neighbor. The houses in this area are pretty tight and pretty close together. So if we got significant rain and the pumps were running and moving a lot of water, you'd have an issue with that water going over into the neighbor's driveway and things like that. But even aside from that, if you have an incline and water going down it, you're turning that walkway into a toboggan run. It's just a complete sheer stretch of ice. Really a bad idea. So finding the right place to discharge the water is the key to this particular job. It's very tight. The houses are close together. The walkways and driveways are close together. So if you get your drainage too close to the property line, it could overflow into a neighbor's driveway and create all kinds of problems. The back area gets flooded, the whole yard gets flooded, so that kind of cuts that out from being an option for our discharge area. So we've figured out a way to get it all done out in the front at this point. One of the things that we do is we cut it in pieces when we're putting in our discharge line out to our bubbler pot. And then we lift the sod and we roll it over, so then we put our trench in that goes out to our bubbler pot, which is a pot that has several holes in it that goes into a stone field and allows the water to perk away a lot quicker. So when we run our trench and we put our pipe in, we can just flip the sod back over. Minimal disruption to the lawn, and it'll grow right back to its normal condition in very short order. With any waterproofing problem, when you walk into a basement, it's always twofold. There's a floor problem and then there's a wall problem. Now we have a block foundation here where they've laid the block and then they take a second course and they stagger it on top of the first course, and they keep doing that till they build the walls all the way up. If you look on top of a block, the center of a concrete block, cement block, or sometimes they're called cinder block, the centers are hollow. If you look at a block, the outside wall of the block is about 1.5 inches thick. In other words, the outside of the basement to the hollow part of the block is only about 1.5 inches. So when the waterproofing, especially on older homes, wears off on the outside of your foundation, water gets exposed right directly to the concrete block. Concrete's porous, it absorbs that water. All it's got to go in is about 1.5 inches, sometimes even less than that, depending on the type of block. And then it hits that core, runs down the core, and the core would be, a few inches by a few inches. They're all different styles and different sizes. But in essence, what's happening is that water will hit the core, only after absorbing in about 1.5 inches, run down the core and actually fill up the hollow cores inside of the staggered block. And standing water inside of a concrete block will deteriorate that block much quicker than if you even let the water pass through freely. So what we do in order to eliminate that standing water inside the block is we drill weep holes into each and every one of the cores to drain the water out. Now we want to keep the holes open. What we do to keep the holes open is we're going to put a drain board, a waffle board that allows water to pass right through it, and it would go down the wall and across the top of our enormous amount of stone on top of our corrugated perforated pipe, which is pitched to a heavy-duty commercial pump, which pumps the water out away from the house. And it allows us still to get a full thickness of the floor re-cementing right into our waffle board, fills up the waffles so you get a good amount of support back to the walls while still keeping those channels open allowing the water to flow through the weep holes down into our drainage. With this type of drainage, we've completely taken care of the floor problem with all that drainage down there, and we've also taken care of the wall problem so that this basement be as dry as can be. It'll never get water again. Now, we've just applied our super slurry. Now, normally we go up 24 inches on the wall. This wall has been dry locked actually a couple of different times. So the super slurry can't get a bite into the concrete. If it's on just straightforward concrete, fresh concrete that hasn't been painted, it'll actually absorb into, grow into, crystallize into the wall. And as it does it, it fills every nook and cranny, and it eliminates the porosity of the concrete so it can't absorb any more water. That is a great advantage to have a concrete that doesn't absorb water, especially with the foundations that water fills up around them like this one does. So this product, the nice thing about it is, even though we only have access to what we call the ribbon, where we remove the floor to get right to the real concrete that's not been covered by dry lock, that crystalline component actually will grow in behind the dry lock paint and grow up through the walls. It's not quite as quick as that if we had access to a completely clean wall, but it's very effective. So that product that we just put on will actually grow through the wall and actually grow up through the wall, and over time turn it non-porous from its crystalline action, growing in and filling up all the nooks and crannies of the porous concrete. As you can see now, our gray flow channel, that waffle board that I've mentioned several times, it goes down, makes the right angle as you saw it being installed before, but it goes right up against the weep holes. Now, because it's a waffle board, it doesn't hold tight to block the weep holes and allows them to flow freely. So any water that absorbs into the wall runs down that hollow part inside of the wall, but it can't fill up because the weep holes allow drainage into our flow channel, which lets it go directly down into our drainage several to 10 inches below the bottom of the floor. And that's why we're able to get this whole basement as dry as can be. So we removed the toilet and we're able to get our trench to run completely flush up to the wall and continue on, so we're right at the wall all the way around all four walls. We had that other issue with the old sewer line. We were able also to address that and be able to do it all through the trench, so it worked really nicely with the plumber and being able to get rid of the risk of having an ancient cast iron sewer line running in. So that all got replaced and tied into here, the clean out. And then again, the toilet's going to go right in here, but all of our drainage, we have an enormous amount of drainage going right through here with our drain board, our flow channel, and a vapor barrier, and that's continuous around the entire basement. So the system turned out really, really nice. This basement has multiple levels, so you have to take that into consideration in order to work the water from high to low, or work the high spot to one end and then the low spot over to another end, and it turned out very, very nice. So what we do at American Dry Basement Systems is we try to be completely transparent. What we tell when we come out to give an estimate is, oftentimes we'll say, don't buy waterproofing from us today or tonight. Go out and get another estimate, get 2 or even 3 and 4 if you can stand it, hearing the same stuff over and over again, and compare it to how we do it. Since we've been taking this approach, our business has exploded, because when you see how to do it the right way compared to what's going on out there in the waterproofing industry, it's just heads and shoulders that we do it correctly. It's a big deal. We also are completely transparent with how we do our videos. We show exactly how we install our system. We show us taking out other systems which are completely inferior and oftentimes a complete mismatch for the particular type of foundation that they've been installed on. There's a lot of stuff going on with basement waterproofing. You know, people say, oh, waterproofing is waterproofing. Oh, no, it's not. There's a very specific way to approach waterproofing, and it has to deal with exactly what type of foundation and exactly what type of water problem that you have. Be very specific on who you pick to waterproof your basement, because over time it can turn into really big problems, and if you get the wrong company putting in the wrong waterproofing, odds are that you're going to fall into that category where you had to waterproof your basement twice, and that's something you just don't want to do. If you liked the video, if you found it informative, please hit the like, subscribe, and until next time, enjoy your dry basement.